This is actually my retirement plan.
Okay.
I started to play music when I was a young kid, and I chose for percussion by coincidence. Disaster medicine is stick to the principles and don't make it too complicated.
Hello, everyone, to a new episode of my podcast. Today, I have a good friend, Dr. Ives Hubloue, and we're going to really dig deep into his personal and professional experience with disaster emergency medicine. And this is a very interesting field, and I'm going to, sort of discuss it with him in some detail. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
He's from Belgium, and he's from the Brussels Free University, head of department for many years. And actually, in fact, I learned something interesting about him just now, that he's a drummer. And I'm always interested in medical professionals who have a musical bent. So he's a drummer. I know Dr. Tariq Shadid, who's in Mediclinic, who's a singer, I guess, and a guitarist. And I know another professor or a doctor of ophthalmology in the UK who used to, again, play the saxophone. And in fact, he used to get his patients together to play every few months. He has an episode. So it's amazing. I mean, it shows you the multiple talents that are in emergency medicine. But tell me about that. Let's start with that, and then we'll go into the actual...
So we start with the music.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
So this is actually my retirement plan. I started to play music when I was a young kid, and I chose for percussion by coincidence. So now, to keep a long story short, I have a band from the department, and I reveal you the name. It's called the Gomers. You know the House of God book with the Gomers. It's with a Z because we had the copyright. So the Get Out of My Emergency Room band. But then, so that's the band in Brussels. So and it's composed by doctors, by nurses, even by medical students. So we play regularly. So blues, like rock, and whatever you want. And
awesome.
So, but then, given my other passion, which is disaster medicine, I also play in another band, and that's when we do our European Master in Disaster Medicine course in Italy. We have one social event. It's called the Karaoke Evening, and there we have started 25 years ago. We started to play music in a pub, in a jazz pub. And that band is called the Disaster Band. So,
Okay.
So I can talk hours about that.
Yes.
But that brings me to my second passion, which is disaster medicine.
And that's what we're really here for. But I think it's to be honest, it's very interesting always to bring in other aspects of colleagues' lives. People think of us as very one-dimensional, and that's not true at all.
That's correct.
Tell me about that. I mean, what brought you to disaster medicine, particularly in that field? Because it's an interesting field, and it's a challenging field.
Yeah. It was by coincidence, and I have to go back to 1985, revealing this. And we are now 2025. You see that I'm a bit a dinosaur in emergency medicine and disaster medicine. It was May 28, 1985. When in Brussels, in the King Baudouin Stadium, we had a match between Liverpool and Juventus.
I remember that match.
Yes, I was on duty that evening as a medical student. Because in 1985, I was just in my last years. And the Heysel drama occurred when there was a movement of English supporters toward the Italian bloc. And we had about 39, 40 deaths in the stadium, and 150 casualties with crush syndrome, etc., that were evacuated to mainly two hospitals. The two hospitals very nearby. My hospital is about two miles from the stadium. So we received in about 20 minutes about 120 casualties in the department. And so we were called back by the chair at that moment to help, etc. And that was actually my first confrontation with a mass casualty incident. The other hospital nearby received another 150. And yes, that.
Were you just in the stadium? You were working that day?
No, I was not in the stadium because there was at that
you were
moment
working that day.
There was no regulation, no legal regulation that there was not on site. Yes, there was one maybe first aid post by first aid responders, but there was no like in event health services like we do with mass gatherings and sports events now. It was not the case at that time. So. It was a real disaster, and people were evacuated wildly by cars, by taxis, and then by ambulances. But there was no real coordination either.
So just taking us back to that day, how did you guys, in very brief, what were the challenges that you faced?
The challenge there that the disaster was not anymore in the stadium, but the disaster was placed in the hospital. So the first thing what was realized that, okay, if you have a disaster on scene, then we have a lot of casualties. You have to stabilize them, and then you have to diverse them to different hospitals. Correct. Now, 2 hospitals nearby, by coincidence, they were challenged with those 300 casualties. Yeah. When we had the bombings in 2016 in the metro station and at the airport, we had the same amount of casualties, 300. But they were dispersed about 100 hospitals. Right. And so we had to manage 10 patients on the whole. So we were not overcrowded or overrun, etc., which we were in 1985 with getting 120 people in 20 minutes.
I agree, absolutely.
And
I think, I've done a little bit of, maybe not as professional as yourself, but, I used to cover stadiums in London. Yeah. And one of our statutory duties is really there for disasters. Yeah. Although we cover first aid post, but we're here there for organizing disaster management and planning. And then I did my disaster course in Manchester, and we spent time in Old Trafford looking at evacuations and stuff.
I've been in Old Trafford too.
Old Trafford, So it's fantastic. But I think I've got a really interest, because the thing is that I'm a little bit. So tell me a little bit about this, because I think disasters are difficult because you can't really plan. No matter how much you plan, what happens is always slightly different from what you expect. So how do you, when you're doing these courses, because I know you're doing the European Masters in Disaster, and I think that's moving on to more advanced disaster training. So how do you can write a very detailed plan, but how do you account for the variation or the unexpected aspect?
Yeah. Then I'm going back to the music. You need a plan, because failure to plan is plan to fail.
Correct.
Okay, we all agree.
Yes.
At the time of 1985, there were no plans. There was no regulations. From that point on, we have a law on Belgian football, sports events, etc. So the authority needs to approve that the event can go on, that there are enough services on the scene to not overwhelm the neighboring healthcare facilities if there is something going wrong. And the second thing why we should have like in-event health services is that actually the people surrounding the mass gathering, because a football game is only 1 hour and a half without extensions. But if you have like a music festival that is like taking 3 or 4 days, there is a community that if you get your heart attack or your stroke, those people have the right to be treated in the same way. So if you don't want to overwhelm your EMS by the mass gathering, you have to have an organization on site. Okay. So how do you manage that? And because as you said correctly, it's mostly if something happens, it's unplanned. And therefore I go back to that music, which I was just referring to. I compare disaster medicine to jazz music. Sure. You have to stick to your basic principles. But what makes the jazz musician a hero is the improvisation. So you need to be flexible and be possible to adapt according to the situations. And so the plans can have the backbone. In France, we call it the fil rouge, but the backbone. And then you have to improvise. But to improvise properly on an existing plan, you need to train your people. And that brings me to my passion of education, training, drills, etc., etc.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about your real experience, but you started with that, which is amazing. So that's how you started. Okay. So that's really good. But yeah, I've learned, so how do you, I have an interesting question, sort of a more practical question. So you're in a hospital, I'm in a hospital, and I'm expecting a disaster. It's been called a major incident or whatever, and patients are going to arrive. And I've written disaster plans, and I've seen disaster plans written. And I don't always agree with what's written, because how do you organize? Because, the traditional plan is to say, okay, put people in zones, So you're here, you have cards, job cards, and you're essentially put people in different zones, the green zone, the yellow zone, the red zone, whatever. But I was very impressed. I listened to guys from Harvard, from Boston, Mass General, I guess it was, after the Boston bombing. And they were saying, no, because a lot of people arrive. So instead of spreading them in systems, what we do is we create teams of people. As patients come, we get, this team is yours, this patient is yours, you go with him to this area. Then the next guy comes, they spread, which I thought was quite clever. I don't know. Or is it depends on the disaster?
It depends on the system you're working in. I agree with the system of the colleagues of Boston, which I know them very well. We are still sticking to those zones because our system and the staffing and the organization of the hospitals in Europe and especially in Belgium are more familiarized when people are working in their comfort zone, even in a mass casualty incident. So in my department, for example, it's built on an American College of Emergency Physician framework with urgent care, critical care, pediatric care, trauma care, etc. But those zones will be adapted in case of a mass casualty incident. For example, it will be the red zone, the critical care will be the red zone, but then the urgent care will be the yellow zone, the non-life-threatening things, etc. We adapted our plan like this. And I hear you saying, okay, I read a lot of plans and it's nice, etc., etc. It's not, everyone has booklets of plans, but what you should have is action cards.
Yes.
Because people, they don't read the book.
Correct.
But you have to have like action card checklists, because it will happen unexpectedly, as you said before. And that's the first thing to do. And then the second, and that's a question I wanted to ask, how many times did you train your disaster plan?
Yeah.
Most of the people, they don't even know anymore where that booklet is, in somewhere in an office with a lot of dust on it. So you have to train it regularly and based, I think, on the action cards.
I mean, my own experience, just not with a disaster, but with just emergencies. I was writing in Sheikh Khalifa, we were looking at the cardiac arrest protocols. And I said to them, it's great, but what happens is the guy has a cardiac arrest in the car park.
Yeah.
Who's going to go?
Yeah.
And how are you going to go? Because, and then I took the team and we walked the walk in every area of the hospital. And we found there's areas where you can't actually get a trolley there. And the plan said, okay, the patient will have arrest, then you put him on a trolley, take to ED. You cannot. So we had to adapt, unless you walk, you look at the practical issues. The disaster plan has to be very practical, depending on the situation. And so I agree that you need to run, but that takes me to the planning.
Practical, sorry, I interrupt you. Practical and simple.
Yes.
And gives you place to improvise.
Yes.
Because you can write it, you can walk around and see how it goes, but maybe they do a construction at that time you're not aware, or sometimes there is a roadblock that is not announced.
Things change.
So you should be flexible and that's again the jazz music.
Absolutely, and very good, very nice theme. So I know that you've been training and you doing training people with a system called Emergo Train.
Yes.
Which I've trained on years ago, and it is very useful, I think. as a conceptual thing before you start doing the more advanced stuff. How do you, and I know now that obviously you're using it for, I guess, for CBRN training, CBRNE, which actually is difficult to practice in reality, but you can, simulate it and the scenarios. So how do you use the Emergo train for the more advanced scenarios like CBRNE, etc.?
That's a good question. Getting a bit back to the basics, if you train and those systems like Emergo train system, and I have no commercial interest, we use it. And probably you know that many years ago within my research group in Brussels, we even developed a computer simulation program that was very similar to the Emergo train, just also to try to facilitate and get innovative things, etc. But the Emergo train system is and again, no commercial interest. It's very easy to apply. You have some whiteboards and the puppets, etc. Don't think it's so simple, because if you train, and I come back on the CBRN, you need to have a scenario written. So you need to define learning objectives. What would you train? Are you going to train the over triage, under triage? Are you going to train the system? Are you going to test your plan? Etc., etc. So first, before running an exercise, define your learning objectives, write a scenario, but write a realistic scenario. Not like you sit in a stadium, there is a plane coming over with a toxin that maybe you don't find in each booklet, and that plane is crashing onto the stadium. This is not realistic, hopefully. So especially for CBRNE, the system is also, the Emergo train system allows you to train that also. So there are victims creations, so there is victim profiles that are CBRN. You can have cars with lorries with all those indications of flammable, toxical, corrosive things, etc. So, but it's simulation, Naeem. So it's not real, but and that simulation, actually it's mimicking a real situation where from a managerial point of view, because the Emergo train system on the whiteboards with the different teams in the pre-hospital, you can link it with the hospital, you can link it with even the EOC, the command post, etc. It's a managerial, how to manage the scene. Yes. So that system is really there if you want to train people in scene management, in disaster management. If you want to train people how to cope with a patient with a sarin intoxication and how to do the decon, then you have to go to the skill training with the donning, the doffing, in a decontamination room, etc., etc.
I think and that's quite a challenge.
So it depends on what you want to train. There is a nice booklet, and it's free online, of the WHO. It's a simulation handbook guidelines where they nicely describe the different types of skills, of trainings. Like you have the skills training, you have the managerial things, you have the real size exercise, which are still have a value. The problem is it's very difficult to organize. It costs a lot of money, resources, etc. You have to gather all those multi-agency people. They have to be off rostering, and that is difficult. But it has its value. But those tabletop simulation things with those, like the Emergo train, is one of the examples. So, it's easy to apply.
So, I think we could go on for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
But more, I just want to, so where are we going? What's the next for you, particularly, personally? How are you taking this forward, the disaster training?
I think we should, innovation is there.
Yes.
Okay. The next level is that we look at which innovative technologies are on the market and introduce them into clinical operations, but also in education, training, and professional development. A lot has been said about virtual reality. It has its place, but it's not covering everything. I think we should train our people to use augmented reality, because telemedicine is coming back. since COVID. If we work especially with CBRN and we are in the hot zone and people are in PPE, it is useful to have them an augmented reality glass, and we can connect with our safe zone and give them guidelines, etc., etc.
Right.
So the next level in training and education is introducing new methodologies, new technologies, and learn to work with that. Because if you don't teach it's nice to say, okay, I bought 20 augmented reality glasses, and from now on we will use them. Your personnel will be saying, no, because it's new, they are not used to work with it, so that will be a failure. So you have to properly train them with those new devices, and train and retrain and say, and they will not replace them, but they will help them in certain circumstances. And so for me, the next step in the disaster medicine training and education is really the innovative new methodology. Also maybe the new methods of education and training. Not the classical way of teaching, frontal lectures. Yes, the tabletop combined with the augmented reality, introducing the augmented reality in the real size, even in the tabletop exercise, etc., etc.
It's a long journey.
That's for me a long journey.
Yeah, it's a long journey from Heysel
to
where you are now.
Coming back there, we don't have to forget the basic principles. Disaster medicine is stick to the principles and don't make it too complicated. And one paradigm that has been said there, incident command is also, we didn't talk about incident command, could take us hours on that, but it's better to take a bad decision than no decision in disaster medicine. So that's another thing. And another aspect for the future, the human factors. How will people react on a stressful environment? How will they take the decisions, etc.? And there we can learn also from the military. And that's also a next step, given the geopolitical situation at the moment.
I think that sort of cooperation between civil
military collaboration is of such a big importance that we can learn from the military principles, unified command, etc., and hostile environment, and they can learn also from us. So I think civil military, even in daily collaboration is the way to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Ives, for this amazing insight and journey of your personal journey through disaster emergency medicine, and also where it's going. Your experience. I know we could go out for hours. I mean, we probably just touched the surface. But not only that, but I think today we had this discussion with a good friend, an expert, in disaster medicine, Prof Ives Hubloue. And not only it was a very technical discussion and also emotional from his experience, but I think he brought in some very interesting personal anecdotes with regard to the comparison between disaster medicine and his music, jazz improvisation, while having a structure. So I think that's very apt and very good way of describing it. So thank you very much, Dr. Ives.
With pleasure. Thank you, Naeem.